right, y'all remember the teaser from last week? Or 2 weeks ago? Was it, I think it was Jephthah, right?
Jephthah?
Yeah, Jephthah. Yeah, Jephthah.
Yeah.
Remember, he made that rash vow, and of course we recognize, let's not. God wrote it for our understanding. Our understanding is this: be careful about the decision you make. The ones that are real bad, probably okay to fudge on that. Do you think the daughter was actually sacrificed in flame, or do you think she was just a perpetual virgin for the rest of her life? It sounds like he offered her as a burnt sacrifice. For me, that poses some problems because God never promoted burning of a body. It was actually a sacrilege. I think the scriptures don't, actually the burning of the bodies, I don't know if there's any positive note today that the cremation is a real acceptable thing today. But I'm not sure God really has that as acceptable. And I realize graveyards are getting full and there may not be a place to bury the dead, but I'm not sure that we're supposed to obliterate the body like that.
Yeah.
I
have a problem with that too, because I think most people do it because of the economical person. It's supposed to be cheaper than a funeral. Still, I don't think God's, because there's not any scripture to support that.
Yeah. You see the nations around Israel that would burn bodies, burn babies, for crying out loud. And so I want to find a solution that's not that. And whether it's right or wrong, my understanding of that is that she just remained a perpetual virgin the rest of her life, which was a big thing for Jephthah. Jephthah didn't have any other children. And actually his lineage was going to die out per his name anyway, because all he had was a daughter. He didn't have any sons. And so anyways, and it says there that year by year they celebrated her virginity. So for 4 days, I think it says it in there. So, but anyway, that's my suggestion to that regarding Jephthah. But of course we know from that not to make those kind of vows, which I don't know. Think before you speak. Be careful when you speak. And then as our decisions are right, be careful not to change those. I think our yes is supposed to be yes and our no is supposed to be no. And I think Christians are probably regularly no less careful about that than anybody else is. But I think we ought to be careful about that in our commitment.
Back to Jephthah, it says that it came to pass that after the end, she wanted 2 months to go with
bewail her virginity.
It said it came to pass the end of 2 months, and she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow, which he had vowed.
Yeah.
And then it says that the daughters of Israel went yearly to lament the daughter of Jephthah.
Yeah. So, it sounds like he actually carried it out.
Sounds like.
Yeah, so, but I strain to find a different option than just actually, binding you on to some sort of, hay/stick structure and cast it on fire. So, now the teaser for next week is Esther. Esther and Mordecai in the book of Esther. When Queen Vashti showed her rebellion, which was kind of an interesting thing too. Was he asking her to do a striptease for them? I don't think so back in that era. I think it was just simply, show me more of your face. And that was considered an immodest thing back in that day. So that's what I think on that. Today we're so saturated in that, we go to the full length of Sodom and Gomorrah style of all those things. I don't think it was there. But anyway, nonetheless, king was looking for a queen after the period of time. And he had all these ladies as a part of this potential queen. A lot of them. Yeah. And Esther was in the mix of them. And the king was seeing one as often as he wanted over the period of time until he found the one he wanted. And Esther was in the midst of that. I always got this picture that Esther was this pure, and of course God is never mentioned in Esther. That's one of the reasons why they almost didn't include it in the Old Testament, because God is never mentioned in there. And yet we see the provision of God in there for the children of Israel during that time. But was Esther just like the rest of them? How did that flesh out?
Yeah.
I think God gave me an understanding of that one too, of how it turned out that not only was Esther indeed beautiful, but how she maintained a purity in the midst of all that, which would be noble, even though the king himself was not. So anyway, think about that. And you just read through Esther. You have a real head start on it. So, how many of you did not get the Revelation calendar?
I don't know if I got one or not.
I'll go ahead and take it. It's kind of like that. Maybe later on, I have them bigger like this. I'm not sure if it's the same. But I have the bigger ones might be easier to see. I also have one on Daniel somewhere. Anyway, I'll give it to you. But anyway, that's the calendar. And essentially, there's details in the midst of the calendar. That's the Daniel one there. Yeah, that's Daniel. Isn't that Daniel? Yes, I think that's Daniel.
Yeah.
And which I think the Lord gave me some understanding on. So, interesting note, we'll be Revelation 14. And again, God keeps re-clarifying and further clarifying the book of Revelation for me each time I go through it and teach it. Every time that I read it, He's giving me a little better understanding. But what He does for me is He never changes the calendar that I had. Like, for instance, today in chapter 14, I know it's about the seventh trumpet, but Revelation 14 is about the seventh trumpet 3 times. It's the seventh trumpet 3 times. And it's interesting. We see so much built on the 70th week of Daniel, from Daniel, and we don't see anything about it in Revelation. But we see 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days, times and a half a time, which is all 3.5 years. And actually, as I was reflecting on it, that 70th week of Daniel is mentioned in 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. 14, 3 times. The second half of the 70th week of Daniel. So the 70th week of Daniel is mentioned in Revelation, but it's not from the Jewish perspective as much as it is from the New Testament era, which is the time in which it is placed. The New Testament era arguably doesn't end until the millennium, but it arguably does in the middle of the 7th week of Daniel. So it's kind of like there's the end and there's the beginning. Before the beginning, that 70th week of Daniel yet to be filled. And I was amazed that, okay, here's this big, and I've been, we've all had this. I say we've all had this. From my generation, 70th week of Daniel was really big in eschatology, and they waxed eloquently on it. And then when I come to Revelation, I didn't see it, which I was okay with. But then I do see it. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, 3 times. So guess that's 7 times. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 14. No, it's 8 times. 8 times. I was like, wow, another 7. Ooh, wax on that one. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, when we come to 14 today, this morning, we're going to see that I think that 14 is going to be the 7th trumpet, which is the second half of the 7th week of Daniel, minus the bowl judgments. The 7th trumpet, I believe, is 2.5 years long, not 3.5 years long, because the bowl judgments are 1 year long. So it doesn't come out and tell us the 7th trumpet is 2.5 years, but it, I think, calculatedly wise, it is. Okay, so let's look at 14. And again, that's the 7th week of Daniel, minus a year, which would be the bowl judgments in 14. But the 7th trumpet is mentioned 3 times. And I look Look, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, with him 144,000, having his father's names written in their foreheads. If there's any mistake as to who this group of people is, it's the 144,000. It says it right here. And I heard a voice from heaven like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of great thunder, and I heard with the voice of harpers harping with their harps. Boy, say that 10 times. Harpers harping with their harps. Interesting here, we see the voice of many waters. That would be the languages of all peoples. And we see suggestion to when Israel was being chased and the waters of the world caught her. And then we see the harlot that sits on the waters, and many waters. I think those things are a reference to the peoples and their languages, if you will. Now we see here also the voice of a great thunder. We talked about the voice of a trumpet was a voice of God that was communicating to the people of God of the New Testament. When we see his voice shift to thunders or thunderings, it's different. Yeah. And I'm suggesting that when we see that described in that way, that voice is to the New Old Testament time, which would be the 144,000. I call them the New Old Testament, because in the millennium, it's going to be just like it was in the Old Testament, but it'll be that new time with Jesus. That's why I call it, not to be confused with that, but the New Old Testament time. So when it says thunderings, it's a message that communicates to these 144,000 and beyond, Jewish specific. Because just like it was in the Old Testament, Jewish specific, and we always say there were exceptions to the rule. I got that. But without saying that, the Old Testament was about God in relationship with the Jewish peoples. When it says thunderings, it's about God in relationship to the Jewish peoples. And that's what's happening here in the seventh trumpet. I believe there's going to go up, these 144,000 are called to be alive now. They're not just reading the scriptures anymore and seeing the peace of Jesus and everything. They're called now to go share, because the Messiah is fixing to come to whom? The Jewish peoples that are spread throughout all the worlds. And all the worlds are there in those different places. The Jews that are in Germany, guess what language they speak? German. The Jews that are in America, guess what language they speak? American, or English, yes. And so that's why I think this is what this is a reference to. And they sang, as it were, a new song before the throne. I think this new song suggests a new time with these new people and what they are saying / singing in praise to God. We see another place later on, I think, is where they talk about they sung a song of Moses. And that would be a suggestion to an Old Testament concept. Okay? So, and it says here, they sang a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders. No man could learn the song but the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. Again, the reason why they couldn't, for two reasons. One, it was Jewish peoples. Two, they were New Old Testament Jewish peoples. And that's why I say no one could learn that song except the 144,000. The church is not there to do it, and certainly the lost aren't permitted to that as far as worship and singing to God is concerned. These are they who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. This is where we have that description about these are all male virgins, not defiled with women. They were eunuchs, or however you want to describe them. They were single men. Yeah. And that's what it says. They were single men. And someone say, what if they were women? It says they're men. Yeah. There's a real attempt to confuse the roles that God has given men and women. And I understand sometimes God says brethren, and they mean also ladies in that count. Yeah. But here it's talking about they're all males. And let me put a plug in, since I know there's a few more people that like this, and us as well, who are not necessarily, under my teaching as you gather where you do. I think it's horribly, grossly, godlessly inappropriate for a woman to lead in the church service. It doesn't matter whether it's in prayer or whether it's in music or certainly not teaching in a mixed group of people. It's godless. And I can say that with no threat of you firing me. It's godless. And we have compromised on that role, grossly so, in the church. And we should not be doing that. And God rebukes them in Isaiah several times for women doing that. We see the rebuke in Revelation for you allow that woman Jezebel, the prophetess, to teach. It is forbidden by God to do so. Now, something that we do in our church, since we are so small, sometimes at Wednesday night prayer meeting, there's only sometimes only 2 of us that pray, and sometimes there's 3 of us. But I always try to have it where a man starts and the women can pray in the middle and a man ends, just to try to be attentive to that order that God has given us, just so that there's that covering of the man figure as far as God wants in his church. So let me suggest that, and this is male, and I think they were the ones assigned with that responsibility, and we should be observing that as well in our gatherings too. So these were redeemed from men, the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. These are the first 144,000 converts of the New Old Testament. And they were saved in the 7th seal. I believe they're just reading the scriptures throughout this entire time, just finding the Jesus piece in there. They were silent Christians, we would say, but really not Christians, because again, that would be a New Testament term, not a New Old Testament term, thus the new song. Old Testament, you don't call them Christians, right? Because Jesus Christ hadn't showed up yet to be that unique, descriptive identifier for them. We're called Christians today, but when the church age is over, technically, there'll be no more Christians again. And that's what we're talking about here. These aren't Christians. These are the first fruits unto God as we find ourselves staring into the millennium where God goes back to doing business with the Israelites, and the Israelites uniquely, I believe. So, and that's why I say first fruits is completely understandable. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. Okay, so and then I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of water. Now, this might sound like the Great Commission that we got in Matthew chapter 28. And first blush and many blushes thereafter, we might want to pull this not in the 7th trumpet after the church age is over, but this is church age stuff. But when we understand more and more, when I understand more and more, this is about the 144,000 going to every kindred, tribe, nation, tongue, looking for the Jewish remnant and telling them, go back to Jerusalem, the Messiah is coming. And actually it prepares them to remove them from the world when the bowl judgments come. The bowl judgments are going to wreak havoc on mankind and creation during that final year. I mean, they are starving to death. They are eating themselves. They are doing everything they can just to stay alive during the bowl judgment. God has taken his people out of that and has given them a plant of renown. And I believe the meteorological conditions has changed such that they're getting rain and no one else is. And I believe that's part of the reason why the Battle of Armageddon comes, because the armies say, they got food over there. And we can go take it because everything is dried up now. We can get there.
So you're saying the 144,000 to be removed from the earth?
No. I'll say the 144,000 go tell to everyone on the earth, every Jew in all these places of the earth, go back home. The millennium, the Messiah is coming. And those Jewish peoples go to Jerusalem. They all leave and go to Jerusalem. And there's nothing in Jerusalem to make them want to go there. Peace treaty's over now, you know. But the 144,000 in the process of all this are all getting killed. Now they get killed, but the Jewish remnant, the people getting saved by the witness of the 144,000, they're all leaving their home in South America, North America, Canada, wherever they are, and they're all going back to Israel proper. And so they are being removed from the rest of the world that's going to experience the catastrophic conditions that's going to nearly wipe out mankind.
Is the salvation available to people at this point? Is it the same during the age of grace, or is it?
No, it's over.
It's over.
The age of grace is over when
How do they get saved?
Who, the Jewish peoples?
Yeah.
The Jewish peoples get saved differently than we do. Not today, but yesterday. Back in the Old Testament, how did a Jewish person get saved in the Old Testament?
Well, they had the law, but they couldn't keep the law.
But they did have the law, and they went by the law. They were supposed to go by the law. They lost sight of God in all of that, but they had their place where they did that law, and thus they were called God's chosen people there.
Right.
Now that's Old Testament.
Yeah.
That will be New Old Testament as well. Similar, see all that?
Yeah.
And it's right, it's a stretch of our minds because we are so church age. It's like we just ask Jesus to come in our heart and be our Lord and Savior, right? Yeah. But that's where we are singing a different song than these peoples.
Yeah.
How did Jews get saved in the Old Testament?
They chose to follow God by living where He told them and doing what He told them. But they didn't. Exactly correct. That's where their disobedience was. It wasn't that they didn't have the oracles of God in the beginning. Because they did. They didn't have the promised land, the place to live where God would want them. They had that. But they lost sight of God in all of that, and everything else went with that.
Yeah, and then once a year they would come and for forgiveness of sin, right? But once a year they would meet and have forgiveness of sin. What was that?
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm talking about, and then sometimes God forgave them, sometimes they didn't, and if you didn't, the priest wouldn't make it out of there.
Yeah, that's right. The priest went up once a year into the Holy of Holies and to make a supplication for the peoples.
Atonement
Yeah. So anyway, those things. But you see, there is a difference from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Right. There are some things that are the same. Salvation has always been by grace through faith. It's always been to God's chosen peoples, elect peoples. But it was different in the Old Testament because it primarily had to do with an ethnic group called the Jewish peoples. In the New Testament, the one that we always know is out of every kindred, tribe, nation, tongue, still a people picked. Still many ways the same, but still some ways different. And in the millennium, we're going to see ourselves moving back to an Old Testament economy of God as He works with the peoples. But again, it's going to be Israel. Yeah. So I hope I explained that without too much cloudiness. But that's them. I believe herein we find, I always go back to Revelation 10 where it talks about seal up those things. Don't write what the thunder said. I wonder if the unction is found in here. They are given this new song. They are told, I saw an angel fly in the midst of heaven, verse 6, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth. They were saying with a loud voice, fear God, give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come. I wonder if that's not the verbiage right there. And it was something that quickened the 144,000, like, I am supposed to go tell my brethren the Messiah is coming. He is coming soon. And I think that's the unction. It's something around here that we're seeing that John wasn't allowed to write in 10. And if I was looking for it in the context of John chapter 10, or Revelation chapter 10, guess what? I didn't find it because it's not here till Revelation 14. But guess what? If we keep looking, God does show. And He may well have shown. So anyway, that might be related to that. What He didn't say. And if I remember right in John chapter 10, when the seven thunders had uttered their voices, verse 4, God's voices is the thunder right here. To the 144,000. To the new Old Testament peoples. And I'm thinking it's real consistent. When we pay attention to the different words that God used to describe his voice, they're on purpose with purpose. We don't see his voice being used as a trumpet after this point. Yep. So anyway, yeah. Okay, and then there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. If we are in a final statement of a first run through the seventh trumpet, all 144,000 now have been martyred as well. And now we're talking about the great whore that Babylon has been made drunk off the, of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And we know elsewhere that drunkenness, that wine, is actually the blood of the saints. And so we're talking about another martyrdom here. And we see in another place that Babylon is fallen happens just before the bowl judgments start. So here we see first run through seventh trumpet. I want to suggest that we start in verse 9. We see a second run through the seventh trumpet. Verse 9. And the third angel followed, saying with him with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without measure into the cup of his indignation. And he shall torment with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels in the presence of the Lamb. So here we see the mark of the beast, second run through. This mark of the beast happens in the seventh trumpet. I believe it will appear before then. I believe it will be insisted upon maybe even before then. But in the seventh trumpet, it becomes mandate. Or you don't work, you don't buy, you don't go. Nothing. I think it'll be, we can see, it's kind of like that breath of moist air that comes in before the storm. We know what's coming. And you smell the moisture that's coming. I think this is the same thing that we can be prepared for, to watch for. We see all these things now, and now, again, a lot of this stuff would have been called conspiracy theory before, but today it's truth mixed with a lot of it, where they say, they're coming up with things now where they're trying to push that if you don't have this COVID vaccine thing, that you'll not be able to be permitted to travel from place to place, to go into here to there. They're going to have something with this they're talking about. And they're just talking about it. I don't know if they're doing it or not. I'm not even getting the stupid vaccine. I'm sorry, not happening with me. And I've asked the Lord that they would not force something like that on me, because that is, they can literally hit you with something, knock you out, and do whatever they want to you while you're unconscious, So I think the Lord will prevent that. I've asked Him to prevent that for me personally. And but they have it to where there'll be a little marker in this little COVID thing where you go from place to place, and there'll be a little scanner that registers it.
Yeah. Well, I know, like teachers, I'm a teacher. And they say, you have to have one. I say, well, I'm just going to retire because I'm not going to get it.
But you have the younger people that can't do that.
Yeah.
Or they're in a different situation.
Right.
You're at the point where you can retire. Yeah. And hopefully there's other things where God has kind of provided for us around the occupation that we've had for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But there's some people who are younger who will be faced with a different thing. Now where do I go? I'll call woodchuckers up, see if we can work with them. Yeah. the non-government registered business, it's going to be an adjustment for them. All these things are going to be hard and getting harder. Yeah. That's why we need to be watching, we need to be walking, we need to be ready and obedient. So that's what I think. Here we see the mark of the beast. And later on, we'll see that those who are martyred resisted the mark of the beast. And we know that those are the 144,000. The same shall drink. We already talked about that. Tormented in the lake of fire and brimstone. Again, a note. Once you take the mark, you go to hell. There's going to be people that start the millennium with the mark. Non-Jewish peoples. They'll all have the mark. They're all going to hell. But an interesting note, their children won't. Yeah. Their children won't have the mark. Unless it goes from blood to blood. I don't think it does. But that doesn't mean there's evangelistic opportunity. It just means that just a realization. First, blush, census of everyone has that mark.
Will people still die during the millennium?
Oh yeah. Well, they'll live a lot older. Yeah, they'll live older. I
Like
think.
in Old Testament days.
Yeah, maybe back in Abrahamish days, maybe so. I'm not sure if it's going to be pre-flood.
Yeah.
I always wondered if the canopy of water isn't over the earth again. I've kind of shifted my idea on that. You know, when you see a cloud, interesting thing about a cloud, I've realized that this is my own homespun thinking again. There used to be a canopy of water over the earth. I wonder if that clouds isn't attempting to get back there where God put it in the first place. It goes up higher and higher and higher. That's what water does. And there it is. It's like, it's trying to get back up there and go back where God put it in the first place. Anyway, just a thought on that. So, but anyway, if you take the mark, you go to hell. If you take the mark by mistake, you go to hell. If you take the mark willingly, you go to hell. You are going to hell in the permanent Gehenna. It says that there. And the smoke of their torment ascends up forever and ever. They have no rest night or day who worship the beast in his image and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and faith of Jesus Christ. Again, I see this as a suggestion here. Patience of the saints. If it was before the seventh trumpet, we would understand that to be people of the church age. But if we are in the seventh trumpet, which I believe we are, and if we're going to look at this saints with a discerning eye, that this is talking about the 144,000, I would note here it says keep the commandments of God, might be a suggestion to the Old Testament law, and the faith of Jesus Christ, which would be now the inclusion of that fulfillment of the sacrificial system found, remission of blood, etc., by Jesus Christ. So here's the patience of the saints. And again, the patience of the saints isn't that they get victory and win on the planet and they pick up a sword and all the U.S. political officials are bombed and killed in Washington, D.C., which would be a real nice thing, actually. Ted Cruz, come on to Texas for a short vacation. The rest of them are getting wiped out. Largely speaking, that's not what this is talking about here. The patience and faith of the saints is those who refuse to deny Jesus Christ even in the midst of martyrdom. I can't understand that. I have hard times following Jesus Christ, but not like Stephen sitting there with one stone and another stone and another stone connecting to the bullseye, which was on his head.
Yeah.
Now, Stephen did it. I want to hope I did it, but I don't know that I will because I've never been in that situation. And I think it could be worse yet. We can concoct different scenarios which would be worse than that. That bullseye is not in my head. It's on my children's head or my grandchildren's head. Here's the patience and faith of the saints. A refusal to deny Jesus Christ no matter how bad it gets. No matter how confusing it gets. No matter how atrocious it gets. And I think that's evidence of the fact that God is in us because there'd be no other reason why we would not betray him. And I heard a voice in heaven saying, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from henceforth. That's the 144,000. Blessed are they. When Revelation, when it talks about the first resurrection, it's talking about them. And let me share again. When we experience a resurrection, our bodies are here, our soul and spirits are here. And it goes this way. The 144,000 is different. Their body is here and their soul and spirit is here. But their rapture/resurrection goes this way. And I think this is where the post-tribulationists get their idea of when the rapture is. There's a place in here where it sounds like the soul and spirit enter the body again and it stands up. And they live and reign with Christ for 1,000 years. That's the 144,000. And that is their resurrection. It's called the first resurrection. And the soul and spirit, which is absent with the body, present with the Lord, go this way and return to the body. And I think in Ezekiel, where it talks about the valley of dry bones, is a suggestion to that very thing. I think it is. Where the valley of dry bones, they put on sinews, put on flesh, put on, and then they stand up. God breathes the breath. I think that could be an Old Testament purview to what's going to happen to the 144,000. And they will live and reign with Christ as the first echelon of leadership in the millennium with Jesus Christ in Jerusalem. Remember, when Jesus comes, he's going to be ruler over the world. Kinda. He's spending his time on Israel. It'd be like, some people have said some real bad things about Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know who the man is or who he isn't. I just see a Jewish man whom I don't see all the atrocities. I just see here's a nation that's deceived and deluded, perhaps as bad as the rest, but still has the favor of God in them. But someone such as a position of Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm not certainly not comparing him to Jesus, but here's Jesus in Jerusalem, ruling, deciding, walking in the midst of, being available to, in relationship with Israel, regathered and growing, with all the promised land God told them. Is Jesus going to Iraq? Probably not. Is Jesus going to US of A? Probably not. He's in Jerusalem. Now, I do believe, and the scriptures tell this, there is a yearly pilgrimage of the world leaders to Jerusalem to converse with Jesus Christ. But Jesus Christ is not going out. He's in Jerusalem. And so that's where this happens at. And so when the 144,000, these people who have died one by one, who died henceforth, are blessed are they. The first resurrection is this way. And they walk into the millennium. I look at it kind of sort of. They walk into the millennium. And there's Jesus has set up Jerusalem. And there's his first echelon of leadership, the 144,000. The first echelon. And that's why I say blessed is that, and that's where they have it. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, right, blessed they died in the Lord henceforth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they rest from their labors and their works do follow them. So I think that's the second rehash of the seventh trumpet again. Second one right there, from 9 through 13. Go to verse 14. I think we're talking about, go back to the beginning of the seventh trumpet again, and then talk about the events that follow. And this is why I say that. And I looked up, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. We see that cloud thing. It's about our rapture. Remember when it said in John chapter 4, come up here, and he was up there, and talked about John chapter 10, the angel on the cloud, talking about, this is the rapture, I believe. And guess when the rapture happens? When the seventh trump begins to sound. So it's going back to the beginning of the seventh trumpet. Again, it's interesting to realize, after chapter 15, we go into 16, we don't revisit the trumpets anymore. There's no trumpet. It's just bold judgments and then finale. Moves us forward. If you notice here on this little sheet here, let me see everything you can see on the sheet there. It moves. This one moves all the way forward. This one moves all the way forward. Now notice how we kind of step ourselves forward and forward and forward and forward like that. There's an order. There's a linear order to it. Again, when I first started Revelation, didn't know it. Says, God, if I'm looking for a calendar, I'm going to find it in Revelation. I expected it to be linear. It wasn't exactly linear, but it really kind of is. Yeah. It's very linear in such a way where you're going to have to read it a few times to understand it, and God's going to have to show it to you to understand it. And when He does, you can still see there's linear order to it, because that's how our brains work. We need that linear order in order for that to happen. Okay? So I see 14 as the rapture. Another angel came out of the temple with a loud voice, and sat on the cloud, thrust in thy sickle, and reap, for the time has come to reap. The harvest of the earth is ripe. I believe that is the church being called out. It's time to call that fruit and vegetable home. And we are. It doesn't stop there, though. It carries on. Another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven. He also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar who had power over fire. Over fire. Cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, thrust in the sharp sickle, gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are ripe. Vine. Not the grapes there, and yet the grapes are ripe. What's going on? I want to share that my suppositions of this hasn't come easily. It really hasn't. And it may not be that you see these things as maybe understanding it like I do, and I understand that. I just want to share that these things, after reading it, and I hope with God showing me, and I have confidence in that He did, but just to share with a measure of uncertainty to give us the liberty to find the things that God would have us find. I believe what this is talking about here, the vine of the earth. I was wrestling with why the vine of the earth, why the fire, and the vine of the earth is cast in the great winepress of the wrath of God. That's the bowl judgments, right? I thought he was reaping. Well, he's not reaping the grapes here, which we were reaped out. They are here. Either dead or alive in the remnant, as the remnant of Israel in Jerusalem, Israel proper. The rest of the earth is being gathered and squished to death. Again, back to the reason why I think God says, except it's because of the elect that the days are shortened. I think if the bowl judgments were longer than a year long, all of mankind would be extinct. But God shortened it for the elect's sake, which in that situation I believe is the remnant of Israel. God did it for them. And of course the rest of the earth benefited partly too, because they didn't completely die off as well. So anyway, the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of God. I think this is a suggestion to the bowl judgments coming. And the bowl judgments, everything in the sea dies. And when everything in the sea dies and all the grasses burn up, ain't just much to eat. And over a course of a year, and it'll be the course of a year, there'll be nothing to buy on the shelves of Walmart. Everyone's run out of food in their basement or cellars. There's nothing left to eat. God's going to squeeze them and bad. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and the blood out of the winepress up unto the horses' bridles by the space of 1,600 furlongs. And I believe this is a suggestion to the Battle of Armageddon, where all the armies come together to Israel. And they're going to do Israel because now they can, and they can get to them, and everything's dried up, whatever all that means. They're going to come because, again, I think Israel is there. They're not able to fight. They got food. We can get to them. Here we come.
So this is the Valley of Megiddo?
This is the Valley of Megiddo. Yeah, the Battle of Armageddon, which means the Valley of Megiddo, essentially. Yeah, exactly. So that's what's happening here. This is a suggestion to the Battle of Armageddon. And so we can see that this is a suggestion that even includes a glimpse into the bowl judgments. They don't give a lot of details about the bowl judgments, but they give the grand finale. Yeah. And we see again in, I think it's Zephaniah. It's either Zephaniah or Zechariah. I think it's Zephaniah, where it talks about this, how this battle goes. I think they have a nuclear weapon. I think they do. And they're fixing to launch it at Israel. And I think someone pushes the button at the wrong time, because their eyes are melted out of their socket. Their tongues are melted out of their sockets. And there is blood up to the horses' bridles there. And I think something happens where they pulled the trigger and the missile misguided, and it came on them instead of on Israel.
For 184 miles.
Oh, that's crazy how big that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I believe that's what we're seeing here. And I believe 14 for me. And here, this is just last read through, because I read through this, I'm thinking, I know this is seventh trumpet. I know this is seventh trumpet. And then, of course, I see the glimpses into the bowl judgments. And it's like, I know this is this. And then I'm reading through, it's like, it tells us 3 times what happens in there. And we may look at these things, and we may say 3 different, slices of what's happening during that seventh trumpet slashed into bowl times. And then, of course, 15 is talking about what the angels are doing, getting prepared in heaven for the bowl judgments. And then 16, of course, is absolutely the bowl judgments. So, anyway, that's what I see in Revelation chapter 14 in that. And I hope it makes sense to us. Again, even as God showed me here just recently, the triple overlap of Revelation 14 being the seventh trumpet, it's still the seventh trumpet. It's still in that place on my calendar. And that's where God is so, to me, wonderful. He's given me these things which are marvelous. And almost, I can't even hardly explain them in an intellectual way to people to where they really sometimes understand it. But then God keeps showing me, I showed you right, let me show you. And I'm showing you more, I'm showing you more, I'm showing you more. But he's not confusing what he's already shown me. He's just further clarifying what he already showed. To me, it's a beautiful thing. And for me, Revelation is a gift. It is an absolute gift to me. And then to continue to read and to share it is an additional gift. It's a time of joy with me for others who would like to go through it as well. And again, and I hear people say, well, so-and-so went through the book of Revelation. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of curious. And then I see they go the same old paths everyone else has gone. It's like they're I don't know if that's what's required. The gift of knowledge and the gift of wisdom are different in scriptures. The gift of wisdom, it's called the word of wisdom. The word of wisdom is direct from God. It's the word Sophia. The word of knowledge, word gnosko, and Sophia and gnosko can mean the same thing, used separately. But when you bring them together, the gift of knowledge seems to have this looking around and gathering in to see. That's fine. I understand there have been other authors and other men of God and other writings that have value as you're trying to understand more and more the Word of God. But God just does this with me.
Yeah.
I don't read other sources. I just read my Bible. And then I read these other people's on occasion and say, hey, and I don't read the whole thing. I only read parts of it because I can't stand reading very much. And not like, no, where are you going with this? And I get frustrated. I just got to put the book down. But I see where they go. They have this little revelation notion. And I'm thinking, okay, this is cool. And then they go off. You can just tell. They get it from this way. They got their understanding of Revelation this way, and I can't go there. So I just go back to the book. I'm convinced if God's going to show me something, He's going to show it to me when I'm reading His book. It's just something inside me that says He's going to show it to me when I'm reading His book. And let me encourage.
It just makes more sense to get it from the primary source
yes.
rather than the secondary source.
Yes, and yet God has those other people there as well to include that. I don't want to disdain that. But I just know there's a huge danger of just following the patterns of men when I'm trying to pattern myself after God and the God of Scripture. So, and again, for us, God made some teachers, and that not everyone can be a teacher. Paul even warns against that in Corinth. I think it's Corinth where he talks about everyone wants to be a teacher. Yeah. And then James talks about don't look to be a teacher. It comes with a greater judgment. But, let's read the book. We'll get so much more if we just read the book. Yeah. And that's with regard to Revelation. 14, these chapters are not easy to come by. And I don't want you to think I came to them easily. I'm just sharing this is what they say, this is what they think. And I'm trying to be careful about not saying dogmatically about these things. But to share, I think this is where God showed me. But it took a lot of time to get there. So it may be confusing sometimes as we're together and I'm sharing these things in the way that I do. So, okay, teaser for next week. Esther, pure or not? and then any other questions or comments? All right, let's pray.